Hello, hello. I am Sinner, and today I'm coming at you with a review of Propaganda by Edward Bernays. And I'm going to say this before, this is just a basic review, but I'm wanting to do like a full-on, in-depth analysis or review of the book later on because I think this is a really interesting book now that I've finished it. Very, very interesting book. It's for those who don't know, Edward Bernays is the nephew of a psychologist called Sigmund Freud. And Bernays would read Sigmund Freud's books and all of his research, and in exchange, Bernays would give his uncle cigars, I think Cuban cigars or something. So he was very, very well read in the up-to-date psychology of that time. And he started off working for the American military as a propagandist. Then he became a Council of Public Relations, and I think he actually came up with the term Council of Public Relations. And then in his later years, he became um, what would you say? He worked for the CIA basically, and I don't really know what he did, but that's kind of spooky, you know, a guy like him working for the CIA. Yeah, and he did help the United Fruit Company um, and the CIA in their activities in Central America by promoting this idea that all those people are communists. Anyway, but overall, it's a very interesting book, Propaganda. It's two things at once. It's one, a description of propaganda in the time it was written, which is the 1920s or something. Like it was written in 1925 or something, somewhere around there. 1928 is when it was written. So it's a description of propaganda from that era, and it's also an endorsement of propaganda. So half of the book he's talking about propaganda, and half of the time he's also talking about why people should use propaganda. And I'd say the first half of the book um, is more about describing and understanding propaganda. And then the second half of the book is more about um, endorsing it in particular parts of life, right? So he breaks down all these different concepts, this is what the new propaganda looks like, this is what people do, this is how people use propaganda. And then in the later part, he then goes into different industries like how businesses use propaganda and how they should, how education uses or doesn't use propaganda and what they should do, how women have used propaganda, how museums and art folk should use propaganda, and all that sort of thing. And he sort of does throw in the occasional, uh, anecdote. And he also talks about science and how they should use propaganda. And it's a very interesting book. He does throw in at the end like some anecdotes about like how maybe this particular science department or this particular university or museum has used propaganda effectively and how everyone else should replicate it. But yeah, that's basically all the second half is. It's more of an advertisement, frankly, than it is or a pseudo advertisement. It's like 50-50 advertisement. And it's kind of obvious when you start to realize it because he sort of talks about propaganda as being super necessary, super necessary. I will say this, which is very, very true about the book, is I know it's a defense from a propagandist, but I think it's kind of true, which is that he defines propaganda really as the promulgation or the dissemination or the active attempt to uh, convince someone of something, right? So it's the dissemination of ideas or trying to convince someone of an idea, right? In general, that's neither good nor bad, right? And he talks about this at the start of the book, where he sort of goes on a bit of a, not a tangent, but like at the start of the book and in the introduction, which was written by Mark Crispin Miller, you sort of get this idea that because of World War One and the fact that in World War One, people were basically lied to about how evil the Germans were and were lied to about um, sort of the state of affairs in Europe, so to speak. Like, obviously, there's a lot that the Germans did which wasn't very good. But that being said, like same with World War II, I think a lot of people were rallied up to go to war for someone to fight in a battle against someone they don't know and don't care about for a cause that's not going to personally affect them. And that was the attitude after World War One, I think. And I think because that was the attitude after World War One, and the propaganda had been so effective during World War One, it led to people having a very soured taste with the term propaganda. And that still exists today, right? Like when most people hear the term propaganda, they think of something bad. They think of something evil, which is kind of funny because now in the modern world, it's propaganda is probably the most hypocritically used term ever because anyone who disseminates any idea that isn't something that you personally agree with is considered propaganda, whereas if you do it, it's education, you see, right? Oh, no, 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 we're educating people. No, that's propaganda. You can't teach your kids that. You can't teach people that. Okay, well, what are you going to teach them? Oh, I'm going to teach them this. Oh, well, that's propaganda, you know. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I'm going to make a big video on this eventually. Um, really breaking down every chapter and the quotes I find interesting. This is more just one of my rambles. But yeah, that's all I really have to say. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you later.